So dragons come from source, and they are like rays. Now rays have a wave, they have a sine wave shape. So they come from source, and another way you can think of them is sort of like needles and threads that have a pointy tip that spearheads into the what we might call the future, and that leaves a trail that can be traced back. That is the thread. So it's a backwards and forwards communication and connection. Now, if dragons, if that's all there was to them, we would have no shape and form. So what they do is they start to spin like this, and we get shape and form. Like most basic example of a spinning thing is, say, atoms. They spin, and if you look at a photographic plate of energy becoming matter, it coils into the material realm and coils back out. So, but we have everything in our material world formed by this gyroscopic force, stable repeating circuiting force. So now when we have something of form, then the lines of communication between source don't just go out with no real feedback. They go out, they come out, and they hit something that feels solid, a reflector. So now when source sends out an observer, it gets a return ping, ping, right? And through setting up these worlds of form, source can unfold. And it's just like an artist. An artist usually doesn't paint a picture and then throw it in the bin. They'll be observing it all through the process of creation, and then once it's finished, they can then look at what's inside them, but it's all unfolded in front of them, so they have a better insight and relationship with what would otherwise be held in a tiny dark space within them. Now, where humans fit in is humans are part of the dragon consciousness that they don't like to deal with, right? Just like when we look inside ourselves, we don't like to deal with that reptilian dragon consciousness inside us. It makes us uncomfortable, and we project that dark side of ourselves onto other people, demonic forces, whatever we want to call them. Well, dragons are the same. They don't like to consider that there's a part of them that actually wants to not be connected to source. And humans are notoriously like this. They love to be in their egos and think that, this small world satelliting around them is all there is. They build dream worlds, they build utopian worlds, they build ideologies, they build moral systems that really are just fabrications of what they think is right and wrong according to what suits themselves. They're very egocentric. So dragons actually, when they create atoms, they also create worlds, like the rainbow serpent created, according to Aboriginal myth, the earth, and it also created all the living things and the humans on the earth, all these non-dragon like forms, and yet each of these forms have the trace, the signature of who made them, the creator. Like we have this serpentine spine, and certain animals really carry that serpentine nature, and we see the shape of the sine wave through the whole of, spiral systems in the galaxy, and the way water travels down mountains and so forth. Now, when dragons can separate themselves from source by spinning themselves into relationship with humans, they can satisfy that side of themselves that needs a break, you could say a break from an accountability to the whole network of interrelated forces. If they were to stay like that, they would be unrefreshed. They would go to sleep, basically. They would just be yang with no yin, okay? You can't have yang without yin. It will just peter out if it doesn't have an opposite to reference itself by. So we are like the yin to the yang dragons, yang, but we're actually projections from the dragons. Now, what happens when the dragons get caught up in this egocentric state of consciousness, which humans allow them to enter into and draw them into? That can only sustain for so long, just like anything that's not connected to source can only sustain for so long. And so that relationship, that isolated relationship, will always just crash and burn. And we can look for stories in mythology that illustrate this, and we can look for things in our everyday lives that illustrate this too. So anything not born from first principles, connected to, where everything originates, is going to eventually collapse. And this is what happens with all creations that the dragons set up, and all human relationships that they engage in to satisfy that ego drive within them. So, which is totally normal. The ego and the connected spirit are necessary for either to exist. You cannot have spirit without ego, right? So once these creations just start to fall apart, you think, well, that's all over now. But no, we have this mythos of the phoenix rising from the ashes, right? So the ashes is the burning away the old creation and absorbing back into themselves the spirit that rises out of that fire, absorbing that human energy back into themselves, and they are renewed, you see. They need a charge of the ego to be renewed, and then they easily reunite with the source and go on. After one creation comes to an end, they go on to the next creation, right? And so on and so on and so on. Each time there's a death, there's a death and a rising from the ashes, a rebirth, and then a new creation. And if you want to stand right back, within each creation there's a whole universe of form. But if you stand right back, you start to get the picture of a larger form. We could call each universe a microcosm, pretty big microcosm. But if you stand back and you look at all the universes that have ever risen and fallen, you get a macrocosm. Same principles that apply in the microcosm apply in the macrocosm, but you just get a larger picture, and you can feel that in your spirit. You can feel like, so I'm only on one cycle here, right? As a human, we can sense, okay, well, I'm in my life cycle. That's going to come to an end. But the universe will keep going. You get that sense of something will keep going when your life cycle is over. But then, because we are connected with this ongoing dragon source energy, we can tap into a feeling of going beyond one creation to the other, to just eternity, right? To eternity and the big tapestry of all creations at once, at all different times, and in all different multiverses.